Dorset Council's Licensing Subcommittee. My name is Councillor Emma Parker and I am Chairman of Dorset Council's Licensing Committee, and I will get my fellow councillors to introduce themselves.
Good morning everybody, I'm Councillor Les Fry representing Dorchester West.
Good morning everybody, my name is Councillor John Andrews and I represent Sherborne East.
Thank you, councillors. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for chairman for this licensing hearing this morning, please?
I'd like to propose Councillor Emma Parker as the chair, please.
And I will duly second Councillor Emma Parker as the chair.
Thank you, councillors. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to run through how the procedure is going to run, just for those of you that are not aware of how a hearing runs. What I'll do is go onto the agenda or just go through some procedures that we have to do, which is apologies and so forth. What I will then do is I will ask the licensing officers to outline the report that we have in front of us today, and we will ask questions. If anybody has any questions to the licensing officers, then what we will do then is everyone will get a chance to ask questions to the licensing officers. We will then move on to the applicants. And the applicants will then get to outline their case. And again, the applicant will be able to take questions. And I stress that they are questions and not comments. And once that has been done, then we will come to the representatives that have made representation and have filled in the relevant paperwork to speak today, which I have a list of, and I will be going from that list. I'll go through the list in a minute to check that everybody's here. Again, you'll get your chance to put your case forward. We've read all your representation, so that will be your chance to add to that. And once that's done, again, we will have the chance to ask you questions, as will the applicants and as will the licensing officers. Once everybody has had their say, I will then go to summing up, and I will do summing up backwards, and everybody will have the opportunity to sum up, and that will be your final chance to have your say, to give us any information that you think we need to take on board to make a decision today. Once that has been done, I will close that part of the meeting. We will then go into a exempt business, and that's when we will make our decision. Depending upon how long it's going to take to make our decision, I can't guarantee that a decision will be made today, but once our decision has been made, it will be sent out to you by the licensing officers. Are you doing that via email, first instance? Okay, so you will receive an email with our decision, and then you will all of you that have made representation today will get a written decision notice, and you will get that written decision notice within 5 working days, and that will give you our full reasons. Based on that, if anybody is not happy with the decision that we have made here today, then obviously you do have 21 days to appeal to Weymouth Magistrates Court. Is everybody happy with that? No, does that need everybody okay? Okay, bear with me, so I need to find my page again. Right, thank you. Do we have any apologies? Okay, councillors, do you have any declarations of interest?
No declaration from me.
From me.
Thank you. Do we have any urgent items? No. Okay, so what I'll do now, I will ask everybody to introduce themselves. I want to make sure that I've got everybody here that has put in a representation. So if I could, we've introduced ourselves, you know who we are. If I can start with our Democratic Service Officer.
Morning, I'm Elaine Tibble. I'm a Senior Democratic Services Officer for Dorset Council.
Good morning, I'm Megan Rochester and I'm a Democratic Services Officer for Dorset Council.
Okay, I will now go to our legal representative.
I'm Phil Crowther. I'm a Senior Solicitor at Dorset Council.
Thank you. I will now go to our licensing officers.
Roy Keepax, Senior Licensing Officer for Dorset Council.
Catherine Miller, Senior Licensing Officer for Dorset Council.
Thank you, officers. I will now go to the applicants.
Thank you. Good morning. Jeremy Bark from BCLP. And to my right, to your left, is Harish Purwell, who is the licensing manager for Tesco. And again, further to the right, further to your left, is Ian Hoare, who is the proposed store manager and is an existing store manager at present. Thank you.
Thank you. I will go through my list that I've got for representations. Have I got Sarah Selly? Good morning, thank you. And do I have Adrian and Linda Northover? Good morning, thank you. Paul Barber? Yes. Morning, thank you. Peter Turner? Thank you. Do we have Marjorie Snape? Good morning. And I've got Jean McBain? Oh, hello. And have I got Robert Turner? Thank you. That's everybody that I've got. Is that correct as to your list, Roy? Yes. Did the lady, did Marjorie Snape want to come down, or? Jean, sorry. My apologies. Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Jean McBain, when you wish to speak, you will need to come down into the chamber to speak. Is that okay? Yes, I didn't say I was going to speak. Okay, you don't have to. It's entirely up to you. But you are on the list. So what I'll do is, if you wish to, then obviously do let us know, because obviously you will need to come down for that. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we will now move on, and I will now go to our licensing officers to outline this application, and it's for a new premises licence application for Tesco's in Upway in Weymouth. Thank you.
This hearing is to consider a new premises licence application for Tesco's at 680 Dorchester Road in Weymouth. The applicant has applied for the following activities and times as shown within the application at Appendix 1, which is late night refreshment indoors from Monday to Sunday to 2300 to midnight. Supply of alcohol off the premises Monday to Sunday from 0600 to midnight. There were 51 representations received from local residents, which you'll find at Appendix 2 of the report. Just to note, a large number of representations that were received mentions the needs of this type of business in the area. This kind of matter would have been for the planning application and cannot form part of the decision for the premises licence application. There were no representations received from any of the responsible authorities. I would like to remind members that the options available to them are to grant the licence subject to such conditions as the authority considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives and the mandatory conditions, to exclude from the scope of the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates, to refuse to specify a person in the licence as the designated premises supervisor, and to reject or to reject the application. And that's it.
Thank you. Have we had any withdrawn representation?
No withdrawn.
Thank you. And as stated there, just to say that obviously planning has already been granted for the store of Tesco. We are here to make our decision on the actual alcohol licence for the store. Okay, thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for the officers?
No questions from me, Chair.
Not at this time, Chair, thank you.
I'll go to the applicant and I'll take you on block if that's okay. Do any of you have any questions for our licensing officers? No? Okay, thank you. I will go to the members that have made representation. Do you have any questions for the licensing officers at this point? If you could raise your hand if you have a question, or if not, I will move on.
If this application is rejected, can Tesco come back within reasonable time with a further application? Oh, I'm so sorry.
They could, if it was rejected, they could come back with a new amended application, of course.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I will now move on to the applicant. If you would like to outline your case, please. Thank you.
I'm grateful, thank you, and good morning again. I think the first thing I just want to do is clear up the application for late night refreshment, because that might have caused some confusion. So, as you all know, as an experienced committee, but the residents may not know, late night refreshment is the licensable activity of the sale of hot food or drink between 11 and 12. Tesco is not turning itself into some form of fast food takeaway, but we have a Costa Coffee vending machine within the store, and because of the means of operation of that machine, you don't put a token in it or coins in it, you get your coffee and you take it to the till. It's not exempt as it would have been had you put a coin in it or had you put a token in it. So the late night refreshment element is purely to do with that machine, but I thought I'd clarify that at the outset. In terms of this application, obviously it is for a Tesco Express, which is our smallest format of store. These stores sell a mixed range of goods. Typically there are about 5,000 products within the store, of which, should you grant a licence, alcohol will be a small but nonetheless important part of that. They're aimed at people either working or living in the area, and in this particular case it will be predominantly people living in the area. And typically people will do about a day to a day and a half's worth of shopping, typically leave with about 2 bags worth of shopping, and looking to purchase their next 3 to 4 meals. So obviously that's the reason that we always apply for alcohol in terms of this. So within a typical store, and we have about just over 2,000 that operate in this format around the country. We've done it for many years successfully. Alcohol sales will typically account within a band of between 6% and 12% of total sales. But importantly, well over 95% of the sales of alcohol are linked to the sales of other goods. So as I say, it's people who are typically looking to buy the next 3 to 4 meals, and that may include alcohol. As I said, there are typically about 5,000 products within the store. The alcohol range is very carefully selected and controlled, and typically you'd expect to see somewhere between about 80 products to about 110, the majority of which would be either red or white wine, but then there will be some beers and lagers as well, and an incredibly limited spirits range, which is always kept behind the counter. In terms of the times for the store, we have applied in line with the proposed opening hours for the store. Planning permission has been granted, but the store is not due to open probably to the end of this year, beginning of next. So there's quite a long lead-in time in terms of that. As you will know, within your policy, at 6.13, reflecting the government guidance policy, typically, all other things being equal, stores or supermarkets will be granted alcohol licensing hours in line with their opening hours, and that's the reason for matching the two together in terms of that. Again, within Tesco, and I think it's come up in some of the reps, we do have a number of other stores within the immediate locality. I think we have 4 in Weymouth. 3 of those operate in line with their opening hours from 6 in the morning till 11 p.m. One of the other stores trades slightly longer, so has 6 till midnight, and can trade 24 hours a day during the month of December. Again, I'm not aware of any particular problems with any of those stores. Certainly there is nothing in any of the evidence to suggest that notwithstanding those hours that they cause a particular problem. In terms of Tesco, again, we like to think that we're an excellent operator. Lots of examples where we have promoted either good or best practice, and I'll come on to that in a moment when I take you through some of the policies. Again, I know you're very experienced as a committee, but partly in benefit for those making representations. As you will be aware, the scheme within the Licensing Act is to permit, unless there is good reason, for good reason, read good evidence, in order to restrict. And you'll find that at paragraphs 9.41 to 9.44 of the guidance, some of which has been reflected within the committee papers. Again, I think it's important to stress that fears are not good evidence. We totally understand some of the comments that have been made by the residents. we just have a different take and view on those matters. But as I say, fears do not of themselves amount to good evidence. In terms of statutory authorities, none of those object, and we would ask you to pay great weight on that. In fact, you're entitled to, under paragraph 9.12 of the government guidance. Each of the statutory authorities is to be treated as an expert in their own field, and you are able and entitled to place great weight upon the lack of objection. And as I say, we would invite you to do that. In terms of Tesco and some of the policies, as I said, I'd said to take you through some of those, but before I do so, we carefully select all of our stores. So if we thought that we couldn't operate a store in a given location, we simply wouldn't seek to take that site or operate there. It goes through quite a detailed process before it gets anywhere near to Hardish's team and a licensing application. The demographics of the area, the crime stats of the area, how the store would fit in, would all be considered. And so we do reject a number of sites around the country. We would only ever choose one where we thought we could operate without difficulty. Again, this format's probably been operating for around 45 years now. We like to think that we do things incredibly well. We have teams of people at head office that are very carefully looking at our offer, both in terms of the product, but also the systems and the policies. So what are those systems and policies? Well, first and foremost, everything is underpinned in terms of the sale of alcohol by a Think 25 policy. So Tesco were the first company nationally under the old legislation to introduce Think 21, following consultation with the Home Office and what was then ACPO, the Association of Chief Police Officers. I mention that because nobody else was doing it. So we were the first company nationally to adopt that policy, which became the standard. We were the first to go to Think 25, which then again became the standard. So how does that work? Well, everything's linked to the till. So as soon as an age-restricted product is scanned, the till will freeze and a prompt will come up. And that prompt will say, Think 25, yes or no. And what that requires is some form of positive input from the checkout assistant, either to lead to a sale of alcohol or to lead to a refusal. If yes is pressed, it could mean one of two things. Firstly, it could mean that someone was challenged for ID and was able to provide a valid form of ID, and there was no other overriding reason to refuse the sale. Or secondly, the person appeared to the checkout assistant to be over the age of 25, but again, there was no overriding reason to refuse the sale. So that might include circumstances where the person appeared to be intoxicated, or just simply because the checkout assistant had some form of concern about making a particular sale. If no was pressed, again, it could mean one of two things. It could mean that someone was challenged for ID and couldn't produce it, or there was some other overriding reason to refuse that sale of alcohol. The lengths that we go to are also demonstrated by another message that appears on that screen. So every single day, this will update, and there will be a message at the bottom saying a person who was 18 today would have a date of birth of, and what the date of birth is. And that makes it very easy to look at a form of ID and work out, for the less numerate amongst us, it takes the maths out of it effectively. But as I say, I don't think everybody does that, but it shows the lengths to which Tesco go to. Systems backed up by extensive training, which I'll come on to in a moment, also by audits. There is extensive signage around the store, which has a deterrent effect, backed up by posters as well. In terms of the audits, we do two main types of auditing. So at least every quarter, we send mystery shoppers, I think is the technical term, but in layman's, we send 18 and 19-year-olds into our store using a third-party company to make sure that that Think 25 policy is working. For those that wonder why we're not sending 16 or 17-year-olds, we simply can't, because we don't have the derogation that trading standards and the police have to use underage people. All of those results go back to head office and to the store manager. If Hardish and team think that there is a need to do more testing, they can do it more than quarterly. Again, they're the sorts of results that we regularly share with the statutory authorities. We don't have a problem with that. The other form of auditing we do is something called safe and legal. So again, every quarter, The area manager and the store manager will go through a process where they look at every aspect of the store. Is it working? Can we change things? Things happening properly? Excuse me. In terms of licensing, there are probably three elements to that. So first and foremost, there's a section to make sure that we are fully compliant with the law. The second section is to make sure that we are fully compliant with Tesco's policies and procedures, which in many cases are way above what the legal requirement would be. And the third aspect is to make sure that specifically with that premises licence, we are adhering to the conditions that are enshrined upon it. So again, it's another form of reassurance that everything is as it should be. In terms of training, I think Tesco probably train people more comprehensively within this sector than anyone else. And it comprises a number of different facets. Everyone gets induction training, and then thereafter, they will get age-restricted training at least twice a year. There is specific age-restricted training that comes in the form of DVDs, online training, and lots of course material. I think it's still the only training in the sector that has won the British Institute of Innkeeping, which is the national body for training, Good Practice Recognition Scheme Award. So again, it's been validated as being up there as the kite mark. It deals with a number of things, but specifically, how do you deal with underage? How do you deal with people who are drunk? It also touches upon homelessness, and it deals with proxy purchases as well. One of the facets of the training is it used to use actors. It now uses Tesco employees to demonstrate what good practice looks like, but importantly, what bad looks like, and the consequences that can flow from that. So again, it's incredibly good training. There's a raft of other training as well. On top of that, all of our management team get conflict resolution training, not because we expect that there are going to be lots of conflicts, but we like to train and empower all of our individuals to have the right skills to deal with any particular scenario. There's another thing that we have which is called Team 5, which is a weekly publication where specific local or national periodic messages can be pushed out to the team, and that supplements things as well. In terms of policies, we have lots, but I'm not going to mention all of those to you. You'll be very pleased to know, apart from two. So we have an incredibly detailed responsible retailing of alcohol policy, but I can sum it up in the following way. We train, empower and encourage all of our team members to refuse any sale of alcohol where they have any concern whatsoever. There are no metrics within the business which encourage people to be rewarded for making a sale of alcohol. We have metrics that discourage people from making improper sales. So you don't get a bonus based on alcohol sales. If the store doesn't meet its targets in terms of its audits, there can be a disbenefit. So it's entirely geared the right way around. That is backed up by probably the most important policy in this regard, which is a policy called You Say No, We Say No. So if a member of the public is aggrieved by virtue of the fact that we have refused a sale of alcohol and complains to the management team will obviously ask the checkout assistant what they did. Even if that member of the management team would have come to a different decision, they will always support the refusal. There is absolutely no point training, encouraging, empowering people to refuse sales of alcohol if you are then going to overturn them. So again, I think that's probably quite indicative of the outlook and the stance that Tesco have in relation to this. We're also founder members of a group called the Retail Alcohol Strategy Group, which Hardish set up along with a number of other leading supermarkets, which is a way of sharing information and benchmarking training and policies to make sure that we keep abreast of everything. So again, that will feed into the systems. In terms of CCTV, we have a comprehensive colour CCTV system. You will have seen within the steps of the application it's referred to. There will always be set locations where the cameras will point and focus. Always on the main entrance, always on the checkouts, and always on the main alcohol displays. There will be a variety of other cameras that can effectively pan and tilt, but those other cameras are always fixed. You can't move them. They're always on that dedicated view, etc. We keep the CCTV for the requisite period. We obviously share it with the statutory authorities. In terms of the layout of the store, the layout also gets careful attention. So the checkouts are slightly removed from the main entrance, but with good visibility. The alcohol displays are kept well away from the main entrance, but in close proximity to the tills. Again, in terms of spirits, we have a small but very limited spirits range, probably about 8 or 9 products. All of those are kept behind the counter unless they're in the cans of the spirit mixers. So if it's pre-mixed with a low ABV, it might be on the floor. If it is actually a bottle of spirits, it would always be behind the counter. I've taken the liberty, there are plans within your papers, but obviously for the benefit of everyone, I've marked this up and I will stand up in a moment so that I can sort of point things out. I've done it at A3 because otherwise you probably can't definitively see it. So Dorchester Road here, main entrance to the premises there. So Dorchester Road, main entrance coming in here. The checkouts are here and here. So you have self-service checkouts there, you have the man tills, and then in terms of the alcohol displays, I've got them here. The spirits behind the counter in that section there. And then the main alcohol display is just there, which will be predominantly red and white wine. In terms of alcohol, as I say, very, very limited spirit range. The majority of the range will be red and white wine. For beers, lagers and ciders, where it's not in glass bottles, etc., and it's at the standard size, we only sell in 4-packs. Again, it's so that the classic thing, I think the colloquial phrase is, someone might try and just go in and buy one tinny, simply isn't available. And that's something that we've done for many, many years, and again, lots have followed in terms of that. In terms of deliveries, really a planning matter, but in terms of alcohol, just to deal with the alcohol aspect, we always incorporate the deliveries of alcohol into the deliveries of other goods so that there is no additional footprint should you grant a license. One of the other things in terms of deliveries that we're on the forefront of doing is we started recycling many years ago before it was a thing. So the previous day's cages will be loaded up with refuse, and that will go back out on the delivery vehicle that's made the delivery to the store. And again, it's part of reducing the footprint and the impact of that particular store. When we talk about our good neighbour policy, which has been alluded to, those are the sorts of things that are encompassed in that to make sure that we have minimal impact within the area. In terms of staffing levels, we have incredibly high staffing levels. We have a management team, or will have a management team of 4. It will be the store manager, which will be Ian, supplemented by 3 others. In terms of other staff members, depending on the part-time, full-time mix, it will probably be somewhere between 16 and 24. But obviously I don't have those figures for you yet because the store isn't opening for at least another 9 months. At the least busy times of the day, you would normally expect there to be a minimum of 2 to 3 people on duty. At the busier times, you'd probably expect there to be around 6. What we do is we assess those levels, we keep those under review on a weekly basis, and we adjust those to make sure we have a suitable number of staff available at the appropriate time. In terms of door security, again, we carry out a risk assessment. So at least every 8 weeks, we carry out a security risk assessment. It may not surprise you to know that the risk assessment profile for this store is such that there is no plan to have a security guard at the store. It's not shown from that assessment at present. However, should the need ever arise, then of course we would employ security. And the best example I can give you of that is we have a store that is in possibly one of the most affluent parts of the country in Ascot. So for 51 weeks of the year, there are absolutely no problems and we don't have security. And even though there's no condition on the licence, for 1 week of the year when Royal Ascot, we have 2 security guards working there. And again, I mentioned that to show how we react to those local circumstances. In terms of cleaning, we have cleaners that will clean on a daily basis, not only within the store, but also without the store as well. And again, that's part of our USP. In terms of antisocial behaviour, our stance to that is quite simple. We simply don't tolerate it within the store. If people behave badly, we ask them to stop. If they won't stop, we ask them to leave. If they won't leave, we call the police, and chances are we will ban them from the store. We have something called a rogues gallery, which is where we will print off a still from the CCTV, and that person will go into the rogues gallery. There are many examples where I think in some cases Tesco have been criticised, but we don't mind that, where we've refused entry to people to our stores. So you may recall a few years back up the road in Bournemouth, a number of people thought it was acceptable to go into the stores in somewhat skimpy beach attire, and we said to them, no, we actually want you to come in properly attired. We had something similar in Cardiff where people were coming in their nightwear, and again we said, no, if you want to come into our stores, there are certain levels of decorum that we expect, and it would be no different here. The other thing we do in relation to that, and again it's more general, is a sort of risk assessment process. So every week Ian will sit down with his area manager and they'll go through every aspect of the store, and they will essentially be asking themselves two questions. Could we be doing it better? Should we be doing it better? And if the answer to those two questions are yes, then they will seek to effect change in the right way. Sometimes it might require a change to some form of consent or permission, but again, it's that sort of stance that imbues everything we do. I'm not going to ask any questions. I just hasten to add, of the residents, I don't think it's fair. I do this professionally, they don't. But what I was going to do at the end is just pick up, by way of comment, what I might say in relation to what the reps are, because I think that's probably a more apt way of picking up and dealing with it. I fully get that they have their opinion. It's just we might have a slightly different one in terms of that. So I think first and foremost has already been flagged. Need and competition are obviously not licensing issues in terms of the Licensing Act 2003. You've obviously set that out in your papers. Again, I haven't picked up any of the issues in terms of transport or traffic for similar reasons. The committee papers were very clear, quite rightly, that those were matters of planning and didn't touch upon any of the licensing objectives. In terms of some of the other things, I think one person actually used the phrase fear. I think it was in the addendum representation as to what might happen. Obviously, the fear is very different to the reality. We do not believe that any of those quotes fears will be realised. The statutory authorities seem to share the same view. And again, the reason that the scheme of the Act is permissive is because should any of those fears be realised, quite clearly there is the power of review contained within the Licensing Act, and therefore the licence can be called back either before yourselves or some of your colleagues to look at those matters and work out whether there should be any restrictions. But on that basis, we understand some of the comments from the local residents. We just have a slightly different view on what that means in terms of the overall process. Bear with me 1 second. Sorry.
Thank you. Is that... You've got anything else to add at the moment? Okay, it's all good. It's fine.
Given the number of people who are here to make comment.
Thank you. If you can bear with me before we go into questions, we are just going to adjourn for a couple of minutes. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
One thing, which would probably take 30 seconds, which was just in terms of the good neighbour policy as well, the one thing I omitted to say was obviously the store manager and the store will have a community board. They will obviously try and get engaged with the local community, work what's going on, try and work with local charities, etc. And that was the one thing. So I apologise.
Not a problem, and thank you very much for a really comprehensive report there. That's been very, very useful. Okay, councillors, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I do.
I will start with Councillor Fry.
Thank you. A couple of questions, please, and that was a very comprehensive input, for which I'm very grateful for there. A couple of questions for you. Gambling, one of our issues that we're very sensitive and conscious of, and you'll be selling the lottery tickets there. Will you manage that with young people trying to buy lottery tickets, scratch cards, and the like?
Different facets to that. So first and foremost, Camelot, assuming that they remain the national lottery provider, because I understand there's a bit of, they've lost it, but they're appealing. So Camelot or their successor have a fairly comprehensive set of training in any event. We supplement that and we go over and above whatever the current regime was. So the Think 25 policy applies equally to any gambling products as it does to any other age-restricted products. And again, if it's scanned through the tills, etc., same sort of criteria will apply.
Thank you, very helpful. Next question, you've applied for the hours that you have. They're not consistent totally with your other stores in the area. Any reason for that?
Apologies. So again, I think in terms of the hours, what we try and do is match our proposed hours for alcohol, etc., with the store opening hours. So with the other stores, 3 of the stores in Weymouth have hours from 6 to 11, and that's what they trade. One of them has 6 till midnight, and as I say, I think in December can actually trade 24/7. It does on a few days, depending on what the Christmas rush is like. And I suspect once we get back to normality after COVID, it will probably revert to type. In terms of this store and its locality, it was felt that we, in line with the planning consent, would like to trade from 6 till midnight. What I can say is obviously we will keep that under assessment, etc. So should the hours be such that we feel that we needed to adapt those downwards, then that's what we might do. But the intention certainly is to trade from 6 till midnight initially.
Thank you. No more questions at the moment.
Okay. Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, thank you very much. So mine was on the CCTV. You say you've got cameras covering the door. Naturally, you have to for evidential purposes, etc. But will there be cameras focused on the car park and the entrance to the car park?
So as a standard, I mean, obviously, as you've identified, we've got comprehensive coverage inside. In terms of the car park, it would be our lands we would normally be able to, but we risk assess it in terms of the locality and what the need for that might be. At present, I don't think there is an intention to do that. If there was feedback that it was felt that it was needed, we could do. But clearly, in terms of CCTV, we're balancing the need between the evidential side of things and what the Information Commissioner's Office sort of says, which is don't have too much. So I don't think it will be covering the car park. If you were to comment and thought there was a specific need for that, I'm sure we could take that back to the business and there could be some form of coverage. But at present, it's probably unlikely.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Fry's pinched one of my questions, but as he normally does when I let him go first. The other part I was looking at was, well, like I said, local stores, and he's already asked that one. But glad to hear the review of hours will take place. I'll be very interested to see the results of that after, if your licence was granted. whether you want to continue those hours. And the reason I asked about the CCTV as well, because I used to have a convenience store. I used to own one and a license holder, etc. And we used to cover the road, and it's amazing how much evidence you cover with the cars going by out in the road. So, but no, thank you very much for a very comprehensive report. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I've just got one question, and that is actually for Hardish, the licensing manager. How much experience do you have in licensing?
I've been with Tesco's 29 years, and I've been doing licensing since the law changed, since 2005.
Again, Hardish is too modest to say, but she's also sat on a number of the Home Office committees, looking at licensing, reviews and reform, has also shared a lot of the Tesco training via that forum with some of the smaller operators. So in terms of licensing, that's pretty much all that Hardish does, but does it incredibly well. Again, in case the question comes, Ian has over 11 years experience with Tesco. He has experience prior to that with other operators. And again, the reason that he has been selected to open this store is because of his considerable experience. He's also a local, I think was born and bred, not very far from the store. And again, part of the reason why he has been selected to be the store manager for this site.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I will now move on to councillors. Do you have any further questions before I move on? That was a bit rude.
No, thank you.
No? Sure. Okay. We might come back to you if we pick up any more as we go on. I'll now move to our licensing officers. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
No questions to ask.
I love these microphones. Okay, thank you. Okay, I will now go through the list of people that have made representations, and these are questions for the applicant, if you can, and like I said, not comments. So I will go down through the list. If you haven't got any, that is absolutely fine, because obviously we will come back for summing up, and I'm happy for you to ask questions then should anything else unfold. So I will start with Sarah Selly first.
So I think there are probably a number of different levels to that, so I'll try and address each of those. So first and foremost, through the store and through the store manager, and we're always happy to talk to everybody. We try and reach consensus where we can. I can't say we will agree on every single issue, because if I said that, it simply wouldn't be correct. On top of that, there are a number of other people that can be contacted or can get involved. So one would be the area manager, who will be looking at stores within the immediate locality, so we'll have a sort of a slightly wider view. On top of that, there are obviously, should the need arise, people at head office. So again, if there were specific licensing issues, then Hardish might get involved. And certainly where there have been certain issues, Hardish has been involved, helping the store deal with things, but we would normally anticipate it would be via the store. Hopefully, some of you would be customers, you may not be, but irrespective of whether you're a customer or not, if you live or work in the area or otherwise affected by the store and you want to come in and speak about some aspect, then again, that would be perfectly fine. But obviously, I'm going to say this slightly facetiously, clearly we wouldn't expect you to sort of come in and beachwear or anything else, etc. There would be those usual rules, etc. But it's about engagement, it's about speaking to people. And so we get that and we realise that and would hope that there would be a good dialogue, etc. going forward. As I say, can't always agree on every single matter, but we're always willing to listen. And there are a number of occasions I can think of. I can think of one very good example where a resident came in and spoke about something, and I think one of the lights it was a store where specific lights had been required for the forecourt of somewhere as part of the planning process, and the light was just effectively in the evenings going in a certain direction, and we just adjusted the light slightly downwards and removed the problem. So just to give you one aspect of that. So.
Just to pick up on that one, so that's a really good question. I like that one. Where do you see the process going forward? Do you see the manager letter dropping or passing details? How do you see that facilitating to make that community link so that it works? Thank you.
I guess the first steps would be to go in and speak to the store manager. But if there's a residents association or anything that you guys have, then that, the store manager, Ian can be a frequent visitor to that. So if there are any issues, they get picked up early on. What we don't want is anything to kind of fester and become a bigger problem. Things have got to be nipped in the bud. And if if, for example, there's somebody particularly noisy that's left our store going down the street, we could be in a position to do something about that. We can speak to that person that comes in that's making noise, asking them to respect our neighbours. If they don't, then we won't sell them anything. If they're, we're a part of the community. We want to look after the community. So if there are people that aren't willing to respect that, there are things that we can do and to support. But I guess initially, if you do have a residents association, it might be easier for Ian to come along to that. But that it shouldn't just be held to that. If you've got an issue, then come in and speak to the store, and we will support wherever we can.
Do you have a... Yeah, please go back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, from my point of view, trust is essential. As residents, we're talking to, at the moment, my trust is nowhere. And that has to be built up from the store's point of view as well. One of the things that I'm hoping to get in our community is a defibrillator. And that would be something that I'd come in and talk to the store about. So there has to be relationship, and there has to be trust. Thank you.
Ian just wanted to.
Sorry, just on that, we are one of the first supermarkets now to work with British Heart Foundation. So we are on part of something called the Circuit, where every store now has a defib installed. So it would come with one as well. So that would obviously benefit the local community as well.
Thank you. Do you have any further questions? No? Okay, that's fine. I will now ask Adrian and Linda Northover. Do you have any questions for the applicant, please?
Okay. I'm just concerned the fact that the previous traders there, which was the Mazda garage, they just operated at normal office hours. And Tesco want to come in and extend their hours. And I'm just concerned, why do you want to trade for such a long time? I just think our two local pubs, that's at Dorchester Road and on the Ridgeway, they both have a licence, and they terminate their licences until 11 o'clock, the same as our local store, Broadway Stores. Their licence is to 11 o'clock, but Broadway Stores closes their shop at 9 o'clock. Is there not any reason that you couldn't reduce your trading hours and the licence hours to 11 o'clock in line with the two pubs?
The actual hours, which I'm sure I will be corrected if I'm wrong, were something that was agreed in planning. So it would have been down to a planning issue around the hours not for the granting of the alcohol licence.
Sorry, could you repeat that? I really don't understand your answer.
Planning, when the application went to planning, it was planning that decided on what time the shop could stay open till.
There's two facets to allowing a place to open and run. Planning allows the shop to be open for the hours that it does, and those times have been allowed by planning. We're here solely to look at the alcohol licence totally, and that's the only bit. So the shop can remain open. For other bits. Do you understand? There's a difference there.
Yes.
Just come back one more little thing. So in that case, can the licence terminate at 11 o'clock? There's not really surely a need for people to be buying alcohol after 11 o'clock. Or why? If the two pubs sell their alcohol till 11. Why should Tesco expect to sell late at night like that? Surely that will mean people possibly from out of the area, not the locals, that could cause a disruption.
I'm just going to go to our licensing officers, and then I will go to Mr. Bark.
Yeah, just a quick note that, obviously under the Licensing Act, hours and other premises concerns, it's not relevant because each application has to be treated on its own merit. So that's just what we wanted to add.
Thank you. Are you aware of that? Obviously, every application is taken on its own merit. So even though other places within and around, like the pubs, have got a certain licence, we can't take that into account as to what time they close. But I will go to the applicant, because obviously it was them that agreed the timings, and obviously I hope that they might be able to give you some explanation to that. Okay.
So I'll just add very briefly to what's been said already. I think first and foremost, obviously, in terms of it being used as a garage, it would have had a specific use in planning terms to be used as a garage, which we would need to change. And garages obviously operate at very different times. So that's the reason that our planning application, it sort of predominantly do two things. And I wasn't directly involved in the planning, so I can't tell you specifically, but there will have been an awful lot of thought and consideration of the area. And those were thought to be the right times. I know as part of the planning application, there will have been acoustic reports and transport reports to the extent it helps and come back. But what I would just repeat in terms of that is obviously we intend and hope it will be successful from 6 till midnight. We have examples of stores where we might have longer hours within the consents. So you might have 6 till midnight in planning and licensing, and actually the store might trade for a slightly constrained period within that. It will just depend on how it works. What I can say is that we're very confident, without being arrogant about this, that even within those hours, the way that we will trade the store, it simply won't cause the problems that some people may fear. I get that you may have a difference of opinion in terms of that, but that's really the background to it, if that helps.
I just think that Tesco is steamrolling itself into Upway, and I think it's very unfair on the two pubs and Broadway stores. You just want to just take over.
Further questions? No. Okay. I will now go to Paul Barber. Do you have any questions for the applicant, please?
Thank you. Yes, it really follows on from the last question. I just take issue with the hours that have been mentioned with the other Tesco's in the area. I've actually got them listed here from the website, and it's only really the one in Weymouth that trades till midnight, and that is only in during the month of December. All the others ceased their license at 2300 hours. I was just curious as to what evidence you've got that there is a need within Upwey Village to have those liberal operating hours. And also ask, would not be a more reasonable course of action to actually have a restricted trading, first of all, and then if demand dictates that there is a need for extending them, then then put in an application for that. From my experience, it's much easier to start off in a sort of a liberal environment and then extend rather than do it the other way and try and walk back.
I'll try and deal with that for you. So I think two things. In terms of need and demand for hours, that isn't really a licensing criteria, it's a planning criteria. And the planning process has gone through and we have been granted those hours. What I would say to you in terms of it being liberal, etc., it's not as if this committee will just literally grant any hours to whoever comes in and looks at it. What will happen is they will look at the application and they will look at the evidence that that application will cause problems. And in this specific case, for this specific application, I suspect they will in large part be guided by what the residents have to say. The challenge will be that this store isn't built yet, and therefore there can't really be evidence that there will be problems, but that's why we have the power of review. But the great degree of comfort is clearly you can hear what we say and everything that we have done will come from the fact that the statutory authorities also are content and comfortable with that. So one of the conversations that took place in advance of making the application was between Hardish and the local licensing officer. And again, one of the questions that came up was just interest around the hours, etc. And it was fairly clear from a police perspective that they had no concerns around those hours, hence why they do not object. Now, I mentioned that again in the sense that one of the things that we will look at and weigh in the balance is the feedback from the statutory authorities. And particularly in relation to trading times and hours, the police quite often will be informative as to what we do and what we seek to apply for, or whether we amend. And it was fairly pleasing in this case that the police had no concerns about those hours, etc. So that's really there. I'm not sure whether I fully answered the question the way that you wanted, but that's really the background to why we've applied for those hours and where they sort of come from.
Thank you. Do you have any further questions? Okay, what's up? Peter Turner, do you have any questions?
First of all, I would say I was very impressed by what I called the ideology of care by Tesco, their great concern about the public, the local communities. Could I ask, first of all, was any surveys done in Upwey to canvass the support for this proposed change? I've lived in the area for 40 years. I've never had anything about Tesco inviting whether I'm interested in having a new store. That's the first question.
That would not be relevant for this committee. That would be relevant around planning.
So planning hadn't surveyed the public of Upwey.
Planning have already made their decision. We are where we are. We are literally here today just to decide on whether Tesco can sell alcohol for the hours that they've asked for or not.
Okay, so when did Tesco decide Upwey might be a target for their new store?
Again, if that's not relevant, that would be something for planning.
Just one other question there. If Tesco was successful here, is there any reason why they couldn't ask to expend their hours? In other words, their 12 o'clock finishing could become 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and in an unintended way, create a sort of late night culture in Upwey?
Change those hours, we would have to go and get planning consent first to do so. And we've applied for the hours that we want and we've got those. So the way that I always think about how stores trade or what the restrictions are, it's a little bit like what I would say when I sort of speak to other people, the law of concentric circles. Whichever is the narrowest circle is the one that you have to comply with on a given issue. So we couldn't just go and apply to this committee for, say, a 3 o'clock licence. The idea of doing that here, I've got to say, I could never imagine that in any event, because one, even in the event that the committee were to grant a 3 o'clock licence, we would still have to go back and get planning consent. And there are very different criteria which are considered as part of the planning process, which will look at things like amenity and various other things, which I'm probably going to stop there for 2 reasons. One, it's not relevant to licensing, and 2, I'm not a planning lawyer, so I'll start to stray into other areas. But that effectively should be why it certainly will not go beyond, or should not go beyond midnight on a permanent basis. I don't know whether that helps or...
I'm just concerned that a large number of people who lived in Upwey have perhaps not asked their views, whether they felt they needed yet another store in a small village. Not at this stage, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I do have a couple of questions. So you said that you do, from time to time, or you can review the licensing hours. So I wonder how often that review takes place in consultation with your local management, and whether that's actually ever happened. So, you know, the licensing has been granted till midnight. We know that's part of the planning thing, but has that ever happened where if you've reviewed it or sales and thought, actually, there's no point us being open that late, we're going to change the hours? And then I have a supplementary question about, or another question about Sundays. But if you could answer that question about how often those reviews take place and whether you've actually ever shortened opening hours. Thank you.
Views, it's not necessarily something which is formulaic in the sense that every 20 weeks we will review those hours. As a sort of hopefully amongst what you heard me saying is where we're very proactive in terms of the store manager and the area manager looking and meeting on each week. We will obviously be reviewing how the stores trade, etc. So if it was felt, either immediately or more likely over a period of time, that there was actually those hours weren't needed, then we would look to cut back our trading hours, which we're perfectly entitled to do so. There are a number of examples of stores where they might have a license from, say, 6 in the morning till midnight, and either on particular days of the week or particular times of the year, or indeed throughout the whole year, those hours have been amended and adapted, because clearly, in part, it will depend on how the store trades. And so if there simply isn't custom at all, and there's just nobody coming into the store, then that might be a reason to adapt and to change those hours. So hopefully that helps. But yes, we do have a number of stores where we might have slightly longer hours for consents than the hours that we trade.
Thank you. And my second question is around Sundays, because stores such as Tesco Express obviously are very popular and very busy after the main supermarkets close at 4 o'clock. And this is, Upwey is a very quiet residential area, different to like the main centre of Weymouth maybe. So how do you manage that? I know you've talked about the number of staff you might have and staffing at particular times, but probably Sunday after 4 o'clock is the quietest time of the week in our area. So how would it then be managed in the sale of alcohol and the number of staffing at that time, particularly late Sunday afternoon and Sunday evenings? Thank you.
So again, a number of different points to try and tease out from that. So I think first and foremost, this is not expected to be a, quote, destination, or how you might want to describe it, store. So as I said at the very outset, typically within the express format, it will either be people living or working in the area, or otherwise present in the area. And I said, hopefully, I said very clearly that we anticipate our target customer profile here will be those living in the area. So it's not expected that this is going to be something like a superstore might, which is a very different format, which will draw lots of people coming into that area. In terms of what we do on a Sunday, I don't think a Sunday in one level is any different to any other day. Every single day that we are open, and indeed when we're not open but we've got our store there, we are doing our utmost to make sure that it simply doesn't cause problems. It fully complies with the law, it fully complies with all our policies. Clearly, if there were to be issues on any particular given day, not just Sunday but any day, we would look at that and seek to address it. As I said to you, there's that process that every week Ian will have to sit down formally. He will be speaking to the area manager a lot more than that and go through the store and all aspects of it. Are there things that actually we need to be looking at and considering changing? So I think in terms of Sunday, it's no real different to any other day. What we are very reliant upon is the quality of our staff and the way that we train them. Again, one of the things that may help, it may not help, is we try and encourage localism. So we anticipate that there will be a number of the employees will be employed from the sort of the near vicinity of the store that understand local issues, etc. So there's no probably one thing, and I wouldn't really say that Sunday has any particular additional focus to any other day from the outset, because we're looking to get it right at all times. But if there were to be an issue on a Sunday, then we would clearly look to address that and deal with it properly. And again, if you had concerns and thought, and again, I'm sort of speculating here, but say you said at 8:30 on a Sunday, there is this particular issue that always seems to arise, then come into the store and deal with Ian. If it's something to do with us in actuality, then we will look and seek to try and address it. Does that help?
It does help, yeah. I hear what you're saying about it being a local, hopefully, well, your intention, a local store. Having previously lived, it wasn't Tesco, but near a Sainsbury's local, that was the busiest time of the week, and it drew in the largest number of customers at that time of the week. And I know this isn't a licensing issue necessarily, but it just created more demand. And although it's a village, we're near a main road that I suspect would draw in business. So I'm just it's not really a question, and I hear what you're saying about local management and reviewing policy and staffing at busy times. So it's really a plea, really, that's taken account of. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any further questions? Okay, thank you. I've got Jean McBain on here. No, okay, that's fine. I will now go on to Robert Turner. Do you have any questions for the applicant, please?
Are you aware of how many police are on duty in Weymouth on the average evening in the summer? Okay, the answer is 2. Yeah. Sorry, this is relevant because we've heard a lot about security, right? My question is, given there are 2 police officers on duty, given the security and reassurance for the locals are dependent on surveillance cameras, and given there have been 2 serious attempts at robbery within 2 miles of the Tesco store in the last 2 years, both offering violence, can you reassure me that the locals are going to feel safe if you have late hours sale of alcohol?
I obviously can't comment on the 2 incidents because they weren't included within the papers, so I haven't had a chance to look at those, and I'm taking my steer as well from the committee. In terms of our hours and can you feel safe, etc., all I can really say to you is we have a range of systems and policies designed to make sure that these stores trade well and don't cause problems. So on that level, given the locality, given what the issues or lack of issues that are in the vicinity, then I don't think this store will cause problems. It would be slightly presumptuous of me to say how I think you will feel, but all I can really say is, does this store give me any concerns that it's going to cause problems for the local area and the local community, given all the background work that's been done, given all the policies and systems that Tesco have, and given what they will do, should a licence be granted and should the store open? No, I don't think it will cause problems from all of those range of areas. Now, I get you might hold a different view, and you're perfectly entitled to do that, but from a purely looking at this on the background of all the systems and everything we know, then no, I don't think it will cause problems.
Any further questions?
Given that we have a national crisis of obesity, and one of the biggest problems with obesity is the amount of alcohol and sugar content, do you think it's a good idea to add to this late in the evening when the medical profession has said that is the worst time for the loading of sugar in the human body?
Relevant, and I wouldn't expect it to be something that you'd answer, but if you wish to, that is entirely at your discretion.
So I'm grateful. In terms of commenting on health, I'm not going to comment on that for obvious reasons, and it's quite clear in the Guidance Licensing Act, health is not an issue. In terms of longer hours, etc., I think there are two facets to that. And one of these has come out during the pandemic, and we've noticed this, and this is part of the reason why we have slightly longer hours. So I think first and foremost, it's about getting it right and making sure that we understand that whatever we apply for, we are confident we can deliver without problems. The second element of this is it's a little bit about convenience and choice. So if there are people, even if it's only 1, 2 or 3 of them, that decide that they would prefer to do their shopping either at the start of the day or towards the end of the day, and they're not causing problems, they're not people who we would refuse the sale of alcohol to, and they're perfectly legitimate customers, then provided that all the statutory authorities that have the decision to grant you permits of content, then I actually disagree. I don't think it's a problem. In terms of those issues around when you buy alcohol and when you consume it, I suspect that's the subject of the thesis, an entirely different issue. I might buy alcohol at 6 in the morning. I might not drink that alcohol for another 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, I don't drink very much, but the time at which I buy alcohol might be very different from the time of consumption. So I hear what you say. I'm not sure I fully agree with your premise, but.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that, and thank you for answering all the questions. Okay, I will now move on to everybody that's made representation. I will call you in the order that I have. Obviously, we have read your representations, and we thank you for making those representations. But what we do ask is that they're not repeated, but you may amplify anything that is written in them. Okay. Okay. Just need to be mindful when making comments that we are here for the licensing of alcohol. We are not here to take on board any planning issues that would have been done at when the application was put in for planning. Okay, bear with me a second. Okay, sorry, just been reminded that it is alcohol and late night refreshment, but obviously that's been touched on earlier as to the late night refreshment, and that is for the sale of hot drinks. Okay, right, I will start with Sarah. Thank you for attending today, and thank you for your representation. And is there anything that you would like to add to it?
I've prepared this on the premise that we're talking about 11 to midnight, the extension of what's already been passed through planning. Is that correct? Is that what we are doing today? Because unfortunately, I've come in here and obviously planning some of the things here are to do with planning. Yeah, I will try to drop them out, but I'm not informed about what is included in planning, and I have to say that that's because I couldn't specifically find the planning permission for this Tesco's online. So that's why I'm uninformed. Okay, so I'm going to start with Broadway stores. Doesn't sell alcohol after 9. You've explained that's nothing to do with you. Home Bargains, Littlemore closes at 8. Morrison's convenience store on Littlemore stops selling alcohol at 10 because they close at 10, even though they have a license until 11. The owner of Broadway stores told me that he closes because it's out of respect for local residents with regard to noise and disturbance. The proposed store in this residential area on the Dorchester Road will cater for all those in Upway, Broadway and Littlemore who wish to buy alcohol between 11 and midnight, plus passing traffic from Dorchester. I gather from the application notice posted outside the site that they'll be further catered for by facilities inside the proposed store, and it's only now that that you have explained, I think, that that's only Costa Coffee. But actually, on the planning notices that are outside the site, it doesn't say that. The owner and manager of the Stand and Pub have invested money, time and energy to transform it into a community facility, serving food and drink at reasonable prices. They won't be able to compete. The family who run Broadway stores have also invested a lot of money transforming the stores into a convenience used by residents of the area. And those driving down Dorchester Road, they sell alcohol. They cannot compete price-wise, and drivers will get to the Tesco store first if coming from Dorchester, and much trade will be lost by Broadway stores. So Tesco's do have the monopoly on cheap drinks, that's a fact. There's potential for people coming out of the standard pub nearby to go into the store to continue drinking, although I'm still a bit confused about that, and then leaving at midnight, causing noise disturbance in this residential area until late at night. And as you have said, you do have the responsibility not to allow disorderly conduct on your premises or to sell somebody who is drunk some alcohol, but you have tried to explain that that's part of what you're trying not to do and that you've put things in place, and I respect that. I know that parking, I can't talk about parking, but there is limited parking at evenings and weekends near the store, and the potential for noise and disruption late at night is considerable, as is antisocial behaviour. And I've personally had to go to the play area, which is in Miles Gardens, during the day to challenge youngsters who are drinking there. And there is the potential for that to happen more, and that's one of my concerns. If Tesco's didn't believe that sales between 11 and midnight would justify the cost of keeping the store open at that time, then you would not be doing so. And clearly, you anticipate a viable flow of people, the vast majority of whom will arrive in a vehicle and possibly leave having consumed alcohol on your premises, unless you're going to tell me that won't happen. But actually, on that notice on the site, that is the impression that it gives. And this is inconsiderate, in my mind, in a residential area such as this, and not a good neighbourhood policy. So it has to be noted that Miles Gardens regularly used as a turning point for cars that do not belong to residents, and there's nowhere else to easily change direction nearby, and that facility is directly opposite the store. It's another concern. But particularly the concern is that alcohol sales shouldn't happen between 11 and midnight. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions?
Can I? What?
A question?
No. I've got no questions for the lady apart from just notifying everybody that we don't look at planning matters, we don't look at parking, we don't look at the roads. It's only the licensing, and this is an off license, not an on license. So it's not, it sells off license. So drinking will not be going on inside the Tesco stores. Just to make that plain.
Yes? I'm going to reply to that by saying that that was not evident from what is written and posted on many pieces of, paper that are outside this site.
I mean, yeah, under the Licensing Act, obviously, premises they do have to advertise the hours, what they're applying, the activities they're applying for. So they would have said they were doing supply of alcohol on or off, or supply of alcohol anyway. And obviously, the police would have checked that because obviously they do regularly go, and obviously there was no comments from them. But yeah, it would have been part of the advertising, and it would have been in the Dorset Echo, which I'm just trying to find.
Okay, thank you.
I've just got one. Are you aware that the Licensing Act is actually a very effective tool? As Hardish will know and Mr. Bark will know, if there are problems in the area, we can only make decisions on what is in front of us today. If, and however, if should there be problems created or caused by the Tesco stores, then the licence can be reconsidered, called in, and a review can take place with looking at evidence and the facts before the panel at that time. And it is one of the very few powers and very few laws that actually is effective and works really well. And we as a panel have sat on reviews in the last 12 to 18 months. It does work. It is a tool that is very effective. And I think you'd probably be able to comment on that, wouldn't you? But thank you, as long as you're aware of that.
What evidence would you require?
It would be around the licensing objectives, which is the prevention of crime and disorder, public nuisance, safety from harm. And there is another one, and it's protection of children. Thank you. So anything that touches on those that you feel, if there is antisocial behaviour and you have evidence that it is coming from Tesco, or you feel as though there's, I don't know, underage drinking. I'm just going to use this as an example that you think, that people are going in there and buying alcohol underage. Then obviously, if you've got evidence there, then go back to our licensing team and say, we have concerns. This is what we've got. Anybody can call a licence in. So once the evidence is there, and it will come back to a committee, might not be us three, it might be another three, and they will take on board your evidence, and that will be then that they will be able to turn around and say, well, actually, yes, we've got all of this information here. We've got concerns. We are going to turn around and say, well, actually, now you can only trade to a certain time, or it can be that serious that you can actually revoke a licence. We've done them. Believe me, we don't take this lightly, and we never have done, and we certainly never will do. So, we do take everything into account, but I do generally make it very clear at the end that you can call a licence in when everybody's had their say. But as Councillor Fry has touched on that, but I think it's really important to know that if this licence is granted and there are issues around the licensing objectives, then you are well within your rights to call it in to the licensing officers. Okay?
I just need to ask you, I just wanted you to be a little bit more specific about how you would evidence that. How would somebody like me evidence that? What would you want? I can't just come in and say, oh, well, there's a whole load of people that have been gathering and whatever. What sort of evidence is needed? And I'm not saying that this will be needed. I'm just asking.
I will ask my licensing officers if they can just give you like an example of one of them, if you could. Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, if it was anything related to crime disorder, what we do say is report it to the police, get that log, build up that log of any sort of crime disorder. Noise-related issues, we say obviously report it at first with environmental health, who obviously work at the council, and build up. What they'll do is they'll do diary sheets, and they'll do like noise recording equipment. There's that evidence again. So they're just prime examples of the evidence that can be submitted to a review. Right.
Okay, okay. Sarah, do you have anything else that you would like to add? I will give you a chance to come back to sum up at the end. So, okay, that's fine. I will now ask the applicants if they have any questions for you, okay?
Really questions, but it was two clarifications. One might be a helpful one, which is in relation to late night refreshment. I should have said at the end of the presentation, if you wanted to put a condition on there saying that late night refreshment shall be limited to the provision, I'll pause. Say late night refreshment shall be limited to the provision of hot drinks via a vending machine, full stop, then we would be entirely happy. And that may allay some of the concerns. And then I was just going to say, in terms of the other things, in terms of the notices, they're typically a summary. But if you were to look at the application form that was submitted, where it comes to alcohol, there's a box or a series of boxes at the top right-hand corner of the form, which says, is this to be on the premises, which means the consumption, off the premises or both, and we always obviously tick off. And so there is no ability to consume alcohol within the premises.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I will now move on to Adrian and Linda Northover. Do you have anything that you would like to add to your representation that you've sent in, please?
Oh. If the licence to Tesco is granted to sell food, hot drinks and alcohol, then I would, for various reasons which I won't go into now because nobody seems to be particularly interested, but I think the licence should be restricted to 11 o'clock p.m.
Thank you. And please don't feel that you're not being listened to, because that's not true. We are here to give everybody a fair hearing. We want to make sure that everybody has given us the issue. This is quite complex because there is a lot surrounding planning, and we just cannot take that into account. Really, it would have been something that would have been real beneficial at the planning stage. Some planning applications, they're advertised as they should be legally. There are some that you will get a lot more coverage because it's caused all manner of problems through the application. So you get to know about some than others because they're more publicised. But the council do their bit by publicising it, like we had to with the licence. We had to advertise it in the Echo and on the actual building itself. I know that was done. I do site visits on every application that I sit on. I do a site visit because I need to know where that is, where people are so I'm fully aware of the area, but please don't think that you're not being listened to, because you are. Okay? Councillors, do you have any questions for Adrian or Linda Northover? No. I will go to the applicant. Do you have any questions? No? Okay, thank you. Licensing officers? No? Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for your representation. And again, I will give you the chance to sum up at the end. Again, we're summing up. If you've said everything you need to say, you don't have to add anything. That's absolutely fine. But if you do, that will be your final chance to, give us. We're here to hear your views, for us to make a good decision. Okay. Don't know why I switched that off. Right, I will now move on to Paul Barber. Do you have anything that you would like to add to your representation, please?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Paul Barber. I've been a resident in Upwey Village for 30 years. I emphasise village because I think this application should be taken in the context of its location. I fully appreciate there is a difference between the planning and licensing, but there is a vague overlap, which I think it's worthy of mention. You mentioned operating hours. I can't actually recall that actually being in the planning application, but there was an interesting exclusion that was placed for when the approval went through, and it was namely that no deliveries shall be taken or dispatched from the site outside of the hours of 0800 to 1800, nor at any time on a Sunday, bank holiday, or public holiday. And the reason being to protect nearby resident accommodation from excess noise at night time, evening, Sundays, and bank holidays. Now, to me, you know, the fact that that's there, it should also be looked at as far as the license is concerned, because there's clearly a little bit of an overlap. I hope you would agree. It's already been mentioned about the licensing hours of the other Tesco superstores in the area. And as I say, they are significantly less than is being requested. And we've already covered that to a certain extent. But I think it's worthwhile mentioning that, for instance, the one in Weymouth, in Thomas Street, on a Sunday, only has a license between 1000 and 1600. And yet we're talking about an application in a rural setting from 0600 to midnight. It's a matter of conjecture, supposition, guesstimation, but to me, it's pretty obvious, or it could be a possibility, that this will produce a bit of a magnet for people who want to get alcohol late at night. And rather than sort of having a rural setting, there's a danger of having an influx of additional people into the area, which completely is outside of the character of the Upway village. I can respect the measures that are taking place, but one point that did catch my attention was that if there's any unruly individuals who go into Tesco's, there won't actually be a security person on site, but they will be invited to leave. And to me, that just seems bizarre, because effectively you're then pushing the problem out into the community. It's already been mentioned that there's gatherings in Miles Garden, for instance. That's not uncommon. Well, if it's common now, it's pretty evident that if there is a facility available that makes alcohol readily available, you're going to exacerbate that situation. I'm mindful of the 4 objectives that you look at in taking licensing matters, and the 2 that really spring to mind as far as I'm concerned are the crime and disorder and the prevention of public nuisance. And yes, I can see it's laudable that there will be measures to impose restrictions if there is a problem discovered, but why wait to that situation? Why not take the environment in which this place is going to be operate, take into account that it's a rural setting, and say, well, do we really want to get to the situation where we're going to have residents making submissions to the police and the environment agencies or wherever in order to get some action taking place? Because it's not going to happen overnight. And in the meantime, you're still going to have this problem. So why not use evidence that could be present elsewhere in the community and decide, well, perhaps it isn't appropriate. So I basically earnestly urge that there is a curtailment of the requested hours being requested. Thank you.
Thank you. Just going back to deliveries, it was mentioned at the beginning that there would be no extra deliveries. So in planning, the delivery schedules that are there, they will remain whether Tesco's have a licence or not.
No, to clarify, I wasn't actually sort of suggesting that there would be additional deliveries. I'm just mentioning that there were restrictions placed on the ability to make deliveries to the premises based on the disturbance it would have on the local residents. So, the planners they're mindful of the area that this is going to be in, and they've imposed that restriction.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Councillors, do you have any questions?
No.
I will go to the applicant. Do you have any questions?
It was a point, but I can pick up in my summing up if I need to instead. It was more around the hours for one store that was mentioned. But I can deal with it now or later, I don't mind.
If if you want to pick it up in summing up, because we've had quite a lot with regards to timings. Thank you. Officers, do you have any questions?
We do send applications to the Planning Authority, and the Planning Authority came back with no comment, literally those 2 words, not even a mention of any conditions that were applied via planning. So just love to mention that part.
Yeah, as obviously stated at the beginning, that we had no representation from any, from anybody with planning, environmental health, police, not anything from there. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your questions. Thank you. Sorry, these microphones. Pardon? Peter Turner.
A couple of points I should have made at the beginning. I'd done my maths correctly. There's 126 extra hours of drinking open to Upway, the sale of alcohol. Just a pure observation, 18 hours per day. That's the first one. Second one, I think, is to do with a nuisance that anybody who knows the area and lives in the area, parking has always been a problem, particularly at night time. Now, imagine people leaving premises late at night trying to recover their vehicles. At night, noise carries. Not only four-wheeled vehicles, but two-wheeled vehicles. There are young children living in the area. Contrary to public belief, there are a lot of workers who start work early. So I think there could be a nuisance there with more access to people getting alcohol. It is possible, though not, it could happen, that people find it is a nighttime place to go. Let's go to Upway, presumably driving there. And I think this could constitute a public nuisance. And I wonder whether the hours could be restricted, or at least this could be taken into consideration by Tesco. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions?
Mr. Turner, thank you for your points. We can only listen and consider the evidence before us today. So you and Mr. Barber also pointed out what might happen, what could happen, what perceivably might happen. We cannot take that into account. We're looking at the facts today. And that is all that we can take into our account as part of our deliberations. We cannot assume anything might or may not happen. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, I'll go to the applicant. Do you have any questions? No, thank you. Licensing officers? No? Okay, thank you, and thank you for your representation. I will now move on to Marjorie Snape. Is there anything that you would like to add to your representation, please?
Thank you. Just briefly, I think I'd like to say that I imagine that in terms of the sale of alcohol and that it's intended to be a local store, that actually demand will be low. So I again would urge the committee to think about limiting the hours to the minimum that they can be, or that is within your remit, given what's already in the planning application, that the hours are limited.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions? No. No? Okay. I'll go to the applicant. Do you have any questions? No? Officers? No? Again, thank you, and thank you for your representation. Do appreciate it. Thank you very much. I have Jean, but I don't think Jean wants to add anything. No. Okay, I will now then move on to Robert Turner. Is there anything else that you would like to add to your representation?
No further representation, given I think we have a chance to sum up shortly. Is that correct? Yeah, thank you.
I will move on to summing up very shortly. Okay, thank you, and thank you all for your reps and your additional information that you've given us. I am now going to move on to summing up, if everybody feels as though all questions have been covered. Again, if you don't have anything to add in summing up, that's absolutely fine. If you feel as though you've had your say, What I don't want to happen, I don't want you to leave here and be driving home and say, well, I wish I'd said this, I wish I said that. I know it's frustrating around this. Like I said, it's complex because of planning. And, you know, unfortunately, they don't sit quite hand in hand, planning and licensing, as I'm probably sure that you've gathered now coming to this hearing today. But again, I want to make sure you've had your say. I want to make sure that you've all had a fair hearing. Okay, so I am going to sum up, and I am going to do, I always sum up backwards, but I always do finish the summing up with my licensing officers. So I will start with those that have made representation, and I will start with Robert Turner. Robert, would you like to sum up, please?
Yes, I've listened with great interest to the whole debate this morning, and I think what it really comes down to is the decision that's going to be made today will be a decision which will reflect both obviously the requirements of Tesco's as one party, if you like, and then overwhelmingly the local residents. So there's two particular sides to this story. And essentially, when you look at the two parties involved, you think of Tesco's, and the financial year 2021, their pre-tax profits were £636 million. Last year, 2.03 billion. So my point of making that in summary is they're not short of a bob or two. And were the decision to go against them, that would not cause the blink of an eyelid in head office in Welwyn Garden City. So if you say no to this licence, it makes no impact at all on Tesco. On the other hand, if you say no to this application for a licence, you will make a lot of local people very happy because there's a lot of concerns over security, hours, behaviour, traffic, many concerns. So that's that decision. And you can look at it in reverse. If you say we're going to go through with this licence, Tesco's will be happy, but remember my first point, it makes no difference to them financially, but they'll be happy because they've got a licence. But there'll be a lot of very unhappy people here in that way. So really, I think this decision is one of whether you're supporting, as members of the council, whether you're actually going to support the local view, overwhelmingly represented here, or you're going to support a very large and successful company, which, to be frank, is financially in pretty good shape. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now move on to Marjorie Snape for summing up.
I think, to sum up, for me, it's a quiet residential area. I foresee that this, and I am impressed by the measures that Tesco have talked about, training and the Think 25 policy, etc., security cameras. But I think it could encourage, it's quite a residential area, and it could encourage some antisocial behaviour. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now go to Peter Turner for summing up.
Quite simply, why Upway? Did Tesco canvass any people in Upway to find out, do we need yet another store? When were the people asked? Thank you.
Thank you. I will now go to Paul Barber for summing up.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, no, I don't wish to alienate myself from the committee, but there was an interesting line there that you take the evidence as you see it today, which is, you know, it's been an interesting experience for me this morning. It sounds emotive, but if you think of licensing for guns, you don't liberally say that all youngsters can have access to firearms and wait until the consequences occur. And surely there must be a similar parallel when you look at the provision of licensing for various establishments. You must take the experience that you've gained from other areas and decide whether it's appropriate or not. And so, as I say, I still support my desire for the hours to be curtailed.
Thank you. Adrian and Linda Northover, would you like to sum up, please?
Firstly, I'm very disappointed that I wasn't aware of the planning representation, because I certainly would have made some sort of comment to that. However, I think it's very, very a shame that Tesco's is trying to muscle itself into Upway, which is a quiet village. I don't think the locals will probably they may use the store, but I think it will attract people from outside the village. And my concern, apart from the villagers, are the Royal Standard and the Old Ship, and also Broadway stores, because it would be a shame if Tesco muscled in and we lost those three facilities. So therefore, on that basis, Tesco's is here, it's going to stay, but I do think the licence should be limited to 11 p.m.
Thank you. I will now go to Sarah Selly. Thank you, Sarah.
Living 3 doors down from this proposed site, I am concerned about noise disturbance and antisocial behaviour owing to the sale of alcohol between 11 and midnight. I would urge you not to allow that. I don't think it's a good neighbour policy, not in our area. And I'm not being NIMBY, I'm just saying that's what I think will happen, that people from Littlemore and other areas will come during those hours. And that will really ruin my life and the life of my retired husband and people that I represent in Miles Gardens who are quiet, to have young children, and the rest of us are retired people, and we really love where we live. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you all, and thank you for your representations. I will now move on to the applicant. If you would like to sum up your case, please.
I'm grateful, thank you. And at the outset, thank you to the residents for the way they've presented their case today, because I know you've all got very, very strong feelings about this. In terms of summing up, we like to think that Tesco is an excellent operator. We think this is a well thought out application. There are no objections from any of the statutory authorities. You are entitled to place great weight upon that, and I would urge you to do so. Clearly, the scheme of the Act is to permit unless there is good evidence to restrict. And I hear what the residents say, but I think, as some of them themselves have said, and I think as I may have commented before, and you as a committee may have commented before, there is a difference between fears and evidence. And one of the features of the Licensing Act is it recognises with new licence applications, there's a variety of case law which I won't bore you with, that the reason it can do that, absent it being an accumulative impact policy area, which this is not, is because of the power of review. So a licence is not set in stone forever and a day. Once it is granted, it is a privilege that we need to hold dear and make sure that we adhere to completely. As such, as you've stated, the key criteria for you as the committee are the licensing objectives, so things to do with need or demand or other issues which I accept may be important to residents are not a function of a licensing decision. And therefore, on the basis of that, we would hope that you would grant the application as sought, as we don't believe there is any evidence to restrict, in line with your policy, where normally stores and supermarkets will be granted licensing hours in line with their opening hours. Again, should you feel fit, I just repeat the offer of the condition in relation to late night refreshment. It's not late night refreshment, as you know, it's that one anomaly. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now go to our officers for summing up. Do you have anything to add to sum up?
Yeah, just obviously the points that have been made about planning other premises operating in the area. They're not relevant to to this application. What does need to be made aware to you guys is obviously when determining an application, you just need to make sure that you're taking the appropriate steps for the promotion of the 4 licensing objectives. One more thing to add is that if the license wasn't to be granted, I imagine Tesco's is going to be built anyway. We obviously under the Licensing Act don't have the powers to stop that from happening. That would have been the planning application which has been granted. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. I will now just go on to our legal representative just to clarify that all legal aspects have been covered for this hearing.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for your time and for attending this morning. Like I said, we will now retire. I will close this part of the meeting. We will retire to make our decision. As and when we've made our decision will be given to our licensing officers, who will then email. You're going to email out, aren't you? People that have made representations, you will know. Then it will be sent out to you within 5 working days. The actual full decision notice. It's only when you receive the full decision notice that, should you wish to appeal, then that is when you get your actual paper copy through the post, not the email, if you're not happy with the decision that we've made today. Okay, when we retire, we do have our legal representative with us for any legal points that we might need clarifying on. Okay, thanks again, and I will now close this meeting. Thank you. Oh, yes, could I have a proposer and a seconder for our exempt business, please?
Propose we go into exempt business.